I'm going to use that. Could everyone please? Is it on? Yeah. Are you? It's on? Could everyone please find a seat? This is on? I heard. It's a rowdy crowd. No, that worked. I think there are a few more people. Okay. Welcome to the 22nd Annual Story Prize event. I'll have to wait for Jay. Only because he's important. We're here to honor 3 outstanding, distinctive short story collections. Other Worlds by André Alexis, Atavists by Lydia Millet, and Long Distance by Ayşegül Savaş. The 3 finalists will each read from their books, then discuss their work with me. At the end of the evening, Jay Lindsay, who just walked in, the president of the Chisholm Foundation, which has generously backed the Story Prize from the outset, he will announce the winner. We read 114 short story collections published by 72 different presses or imprints in 2025. What made these 3 books stand out was the skill of the writing on the sentence level and the originality of the stories and the collections as a whole. We chose the finalists, and 3 independent judges determined the winner: writer and copy editor Benjamin Dreyer, writer and past Story Prize winner Ling Ma, and Chicago librarian Stephen Sposato. In preparation for this event, I read these 3 books a second time, and in each case, the brilliance of the individual stories and the cohesiveness of the collections became more apparent. Some of you might catch everything the first time, but a second reading can be a revelation, especially when the writers are as skillful and creative as these 3 are. We hope you'll buy, and more importantly, read Other Worlds, Atavists, and Long Distance. Signed copies are available for purchase here from 192 Books. And if you're watching online, we've included a link to a list posted on bookshop.org. I'd also like to mention one other short story collection we read in 2025, Trying to Be by John Haskell, which is this year's winner of the Story Prize Spotlight Award. Books such as this and those of the 3 finalists demonstrate that the short story remains an elastic, vital, and dynamic literary form with near limitless possibilities, and remind us why we started a book award for short stories in the first place. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Julie and Jay Lindsay for their decades-long support of the Story Prize. I'd also like to thank Asher Dark, who assisted me in getting, tracking, and reading the 114 books we received, and Melissa Olcott, who takes care of the many logistics involved in organizing this event. The first finalist we'll hear from tonight is André Alexis. From the brilliant and surprising opening novella, and throughout the other stories in Other Worlds, Alexis plays off various genres to brilliant effect. Each story defies expectations in ways that ultimately feel well-earned, and the writing throughout is both erudite and playful. André?
I'm going to read from a story called Persongning, and I'm going to time myself so that it's only 8 minutes long. Here we go. Persongning, an appreciation. Persongning, an appreciation. Is that better? This better? Okay. Sorry about that. This is the first story in a bunch of, in a series of 5 from a collection, from a story called Persongning and Appreciation. And it starts with a quote from Persongning, who's a great Chinese writer. To do good without intending it merits no reward, though it is still good. To do evil without intending it merits no punishment, though it is still evil. Part 1, An Apprentice. Having been a much-honored lecturer at the University of Toronto, Medard Albuy retired at the age of 70 in order to find an apprentice to whom he could pass on all of the learning of medicine, both light and dark, that he'd accumulated in a lifetime of study. This search of his was unexpectedly arduous. For one thing, Professor Albuy, no longer affiliated with the university, found it difficult to attract suitable candidates. Those he approached, including some of his own best students, turned him down when they learned he would be teaching superstition, and just as disobliging to them that they'd received no university credits for listening to him. Tired of looking for a candidate among the university's students, Professor Albuy let it be known that he would teach anyone, educated or not, who showed the will and aptitude to learn. Word of this got out, but although he interviewed a number of candidates, none was suitable, most having in mind that they would learn to punish their enemies with voodoo or obieh and then quit. Among these candidates, there was a subset who wished to simply pay him to punish their enemies. So, after a year of looking, Medard, now simply Mr. Albuy, gave up his quest for an apprentice, feeling with some bitterness that he would sooner cut off a finger than share any of the precious things he'd carefully culled from a life's work. Perversely, it was when he abandoned his search that the city seemed to realize what it had missed. Candidates, serious candidates, some of whom he might have accepted just weeks before, petitioned him during the day, asking to be considered for apprenticeship. But having decided against taking on an apprentice, Medard set an impossible requirement for anyone wishing to study from him. They were to bring something dead back to life in front of him. He would, he said, gladly mentor anyone who could do this. There being none who could reanimate the dead, the number of candidates fell to 0. All the hopeful gave up, and Mr. Albuy was free to study, write, gather medicines, and practice the medical arts as he wished, in peace. One evening, as he was writing down the medicinal effects of willow sap, ground cumin, and warfarin, he heard a faint tapping as if the wind-blown branch from a tree were rhythmically ticking on his door, then stopping, then ticking again. As he lived on the 8th floor of an apartment building, the tree branch was unlikely. On opening his door, he was faced with a tall woman, 5'11", who dressed in a gray 2-piece suit, white shirt, and black blundstones. She was light-skinned and slim. Her white hair, a modest pompadour, lay on top of her head like a kind of wing, while the sides and back were buzz cut. Her outfit was distracting, but something about her spirit put him at ease. She looked at him for a moment before respectfully offering him a white plate on which a mushroom omelette lay. "This is for you, Mr. Albuy," she said. And when he'd taken the plate, she stepped back. "What do you want me to do with this?" he asked. The plate was warm and the omelette smelled good, but he was not hungry. "The mushrooms were dead, but the omelette is alive," she answered. "I'm thinking of becoming your apprentice." He wasn't sure it was prudent to look at her directly, there being a chance she was mentally unstable. He wondered if she was pulling his leg. He looked around to see if they were being filmed, and seeing no one else, he said, "I won't eat this because I'm not hungry, but I disagree about the omelette being alive." The young woman, for her part, seemed to have no difficulty looking at him directly. She held his gaze until he began to feel awkward. "People always talk about mushrooms bringing dishes to life," she said. "But you weren't being metaphorical?" "I'm not a poet," Medard said. If you'd like to be my apprentice, you'll have to bring something actually dead back to actual life, and I prefer you do this during the day." "I understand," she answered. "My name is Lucinda Sue. I work during the day. Would you mind if I returned in 3 days at the same time?" "It's 7 in the evening," said Medard. "It's a little late. But if you're going to bring something back to life in 3 days, at 7 o'clock, I'll be happy to see it." Before he could say anything else, Lucinda had taken the omelette from him and made her way down the stairs. 3 days passed, and at 7 o'clock in the evening there was the same gentle knocking at his door. Even though he was expecting it, the knock seemed to him so delicate that he could not associate it with the woman he'd met. Lucinda had not seemed wraith-like or retiring. It was her, however, dressed much as she had been, suit and bluntstones, but with a blue shirt this time. Beneath one arm she was holding a shoebox, the top of which had been crudely punctured 5 or 6 times. After greeting him and entering his apartment, she said, "I've brought you a dead rat." "Bring it into my office," he answered, and led her into a large square room, no doubt once used as a bedroom, in the center of which there was a solid wooden desk and, more remarkably, floor-to-ceiling shelves against 3 of the room's walls. On the shelves, bottles and boxes, files, containers, and plants. Lucinda paused on entering, taking a moment to look around before nodding. A lock of white hair fell across her face, which prompted Medard to surmise that it was unusual to see a young woman of color with white hair. "Do you mind?" Lucinda asked. But she did not wait for an answer, instead placing the box on his desk, lifting its cover and withdrawing a large, immobile rat from within it. She then passed the rat to Medard, who, at a loss for what to do, put his palms together so that the rat lay unmoving on them. "Let's agree that the rat is dead," said Lucinda. And it did appear that the rat, its white fur groomed as if for a court appearance, was not alive. "All right," said Medard, "let's say the rat is dead." At these words, Lucinda spoke in a language that sounded like French and patted the rat on the side of its head as if waking a friend. To no one's surprise, a frisson shook the creature, and it came to life, sitting up on Medard's palms, sniffing its way as rats will, and agilely jumping to Lucinda's palm before climbing up her arm to perch on her shoulder. "Is this what you had in mind?" Lucinda asked. The truth was that Medard Albuy had nothing in particular in mind. He hadn't imagined that anyone would try to convince him they could raise the dead. So he had not tried to imagine what bringing a rat or any creature back to life would look like. He had a strong suspicion, however, that the rat had not been dead. If it had, would there have been any need for perforations in the shoebox? On the other hand, he did not want to call the young woman a liar. Something about her interested him. If the rat hadn't been dead, it had been impeccably trained, and that in itself was remarkable. "I'm not saying I don't believe you," he said, "but I'm not convinced your rat was positively dead." Both the rat, who was now on Lucinda's shoulder, and the young woman looked at him fixedly. It was as if each had one eyebrow arched, though, of course, the rat did not have eyebrows as such. "Well," said Lucinda, "I guess we're at an impasse. What do you suggest?" Why, Medard wondered, should he be the one to break the impasse? "If you'll come back in 2 days," he answered, "I'll provide the dead animal. If you can revive it, I'll take you as my apprentice." Lucinda and the rat on her shoulder both seemed to regard this as reasonable. "Then I'll see you in 2 days," Lucinda said. My 8 minutes are up.
I obviously need this based on my speech at the podium. There we go. Andre, there's, I don't know what I would call it, magic or sorcery or, I don't know, some kind of native medicine in some of the other stories. How do you know about that? Are these recipes you call out, are they
Pure invention.
Pure
I know
invention.
nothing about medicine at all. My father was a doctor, though, so all through my work, there's probably over many doctors and formulas for this, that, and the other thing. I remember when I was young and we had just moved to Ottawa, that one of the most impressive things for me, my father went to the University of Ottawa, and we happened to live in a student house right beside it. And on my way to school, I would look in at what was the laboratory, and I would see animals in cages and men and women going by, taking the animals, doing stuff with them, which I didn't know, but which struck me as like an incredible world.
A lot of the stories, maybe all of them, are playing off of other forms or other stories by other writers. Can you just say for this particular story what the form is you're sort of playing with?
This one is actually pretty much a dedication to Pesongning, the Chinese writer. It's complicated to talk about this collection because it came about by accident, but it's really quite consistent in its stories. My father died and my mother has dementia, and the loss of my parents was something that I wasn't able to write about when my father died, but which really occupied my imagination as I was writing these stories. And so the idea of parentage and your inheritance broadened from just my parents into the works of literature that have influenced me deeply, not the most deeply, but deeply. So there's a story that's in the style of Witold Gombrowicz. One of the stories is inspired by Dostoevsky, Pesongning, Yasunari Kawabata, all the writers that meant a lot to me while I was learning my trade came back to me as kind of parental in a way as well. And part of what was interesting in mourning my parents was in getting closer to the writers that I've loved, Jane Austen, any number. And so at the same time as I was grieving the loss of my parents, I was also very much close to what had influenced me and turned me into what I was as a human, but also as a writer. And it was from that I sort of felt that the collection is both a goodbye and a sense of gratitude for what has been.
Sorry,
That's a very elaborate answer.
No, it's a very good answer. Did it start with one particular story in the book, and then you wrote another, and then you knew you had something? How did this take shape?
Okay, so I'm about to tell you something that I shouldn't. And Ellen, you'll have to close your ears. So Huinum, which is the first story, was submitted to the New Yorker, and they took it, and they have a certain set of rules that they do with individual stories. But if the stories are part of a collection, then they have a different set of rules to what they own and what they do. And I had no inclination or no sense that I was going to write a collection of short stories. But in order to change the relationship to the short story, I said, yes, I do have a collection of short stories. And I came up with the name on the spot, Other Worlds, not thinking that it would have any kind of deep meaning, but it did. So even though I hadn't at the time had a collection of short stories in mind, they sort of like concretized around certain ideas. And so the story is basically a legal mystery. The collection is.
I hate to tell you this, but there's an editor from the New Yorker here.
Sorry.
There really is.
Uh-oh.
But I think now that the book's out, you're safe.
Yes.
Because you did write a story collection. There's the opening story.
Thanks for betraying me, Larry.
You said you didn't think you should tell us, but then you did. You can't blame me. The first story is a novella, and it starts in Trinidad, and that's where your family is from. What kind of influence did that have on this collection, across the collection?
Well, because it is dedicated to my parents, both of whom are Trinidadian. I was born in Trinidad as well, so it's a looking back at Trinidad in some ways. I mean, I'm often asked what the connection is to Trinidad within me and what the connection is to Canada. Trinidad is where I first learned about language. It's where I first heard the English language spoken. It's the environment that is really, really important to me. And the distance that Canada has provided me from Trinidad, in a way, has allowed me to, I see it retreating, but I think of it more intensely as I get older. And so Trinidad is both a kind of retreating shoreline at the same time as, you know, when it is retreating, you kind of have a sense of the largest things on the shoreline, trees, whatever. And it's that psychologically as well. The kind of bigger things stay in your mind and influence you. And so Trinidad has had that influence on me, and that the deep things have stayed with me. But they're filtered through Canada, which is a country that has allowed me to be a writer, encouraged me to be a writer, and has provided the kind of distance from Trinidad that has allowed me to carry that shard of Trinidad within me and watch its variations in my work. So it's important to me as the place of origin, but it's also important to me as a kind of place that I look back on and that is constantly creative in that way.
Is it a place you go back to? Or?
No, a couple of years ago, I went back for the Bocas Prize because one of my books had been nominated for the prize. And I liked being there, but I was satisfied that I might never see it again. And in a way, that's because the internal Trinidad has a greater intensity for me than the actual island does. Some of my cousins still live there. It's the place that I was born. So there is something there that is irreversibly me. But I don't need the actual Trinidad in order to create with it.
Was English your second language?
English is my first language. French is my second language.
Oh, French is your second language.
Yes. French is important to me, though, because it provides a kind of backdrop to English that I like. And then I suppose my parents spoke a kind of Creole, which was frustrating and weird to me as a child.
The last piece in the book, I think it's called An Elegy. Is that what it's called?
Yes, the essay.
I take that's not a piece of fiction, but more an essay. It
is an essay, but I love the idea that it might be taken as a piece of fiction. I can't remember what Jenna, my editor, said about announcing it as an essay or not. It felt more that it comes within the rhythm of the piece. The book as a whole was interesting. You know, that it could potentially be fictional or not, depending on how you approached it as a reader. So it was nice to mix those two things.
Yeah, it sort of covers the themes of the entire book.
Yes.
So you could have put it first, too.
It would have, in fact, directed how you read the other pieces. So it's better at the end so that it casts a reflection back. So if you're inclined, you can read them in the light of what you know at the end.
Have you done anything like this before, where you sort of mixed forms?
Constantly, yeah. Constantly, because I don't know how to express this easily, but for me, genre is an important aspect of fiction. I remember I was talking to Curtis Sittenfeld, and she made the point that what she felt that genre was whatever your editor or your publisher decided it was, that it was a kind of arbitrarily assigned to books. And I don't agree with that. I think that there are conventions of the Western and conventions of romance and conventions of vampire novels that are observed through those different genres. And that if you read enough of them, you can get familiar with those conventions and play with them. And what struck me as really interesting about playing with genre is that if God appears in a vampire story, for instance, it has a resonance within vampire stories that it doesn't have quite within Westerns, and that doesn't have quite within romances, that different ideas land differently if you are using different genre conventions. And in a way, by using genre conventions in that way, you can approach ideas from different perspectives, which is why I love genres and why I used an isekai, which is a Japanese genre, for the first story, because it allowed me to talk about certain things that I have talked about elsewhere, but in a different genre, which illuminates my ideas in a different way.
I think most people are probably unfamiliar with that form. Can you just
absolutely?
Sort
And
of say
isekai
what it
is so common that a lot of publishers ban the submission of isekais, but they're really common in Japan. And what it is, in essence, is somebody dies and is reborn in another world, a fictional world, or at a time that is different. So before their birth, long after their birth. The convention is that you die and that you are reborn, and you either have specific knowledge and you use that to succeed within the new world or to fail within the new world.
kind of a spoiler for the story?
Yeah, I suppose. But the thing is that it's so conventional that if you know what an isekai is, you could read that in the wiki in 2 seconds.
Plus, you don't know what that person will be reborn as, right?
Exactly, and you also don't know how the person is using the conventions, which is, it's about surprise in a way.
So, did you say that you came up with the title Other Worlds before you had written all of the stories?
I had no idea I was going to write a collection of short stories. But yes.
And did that end up guiding you in how you wrote them, or is it just a theme of your work that
What ended up happening was that it was appropriate for how I was thinking about things at that time. So the collection has stories that are about the father dying, about the mother dying, about paternity, about maternity, and they sort of gathered around that title in a way that was unexpected because it was unplanned. But when you say unplanned, if I could come up with that title and then write a bunch of stories that are appropriate to that title, it was clearly within me at the time. So perhaps I didn't lie to the New Yorker.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, André. The second finalist is Lydia Millet. Atavists depicts a world that will be familiar to many readers, a middle-class suburban enclave full of fretful parents and adult children uncertain about their future paths. In a time when the future itself is so fretfully uncertain. Though the intricately connected characters are rife with foibles, Millet skillfully depicts them with humor and affection. Lydia?
Just checking the water supply. So this book is called Atavists, and each story is an ist. So each is named for sort of its protagonist. So, for example, there's tourist, dramatist, fetishist, mixologist, gerontologist, cultist, therapist, etc. I will read briefly from one called Optimist, which is the last in the book, and probably just about 3 pages. I'm not timing myself, so feel free to scream if I go over. Since he couldn't run distance anymore, Buzz had been looking for new hobbies, though he didn't call them that. There were some early misfires. She tried to be supportive. First, it was learning to sea kayak, which wasn't so easy, living an hour from the beach in light traffic, an hour and a half if there was a slowdown on the 10. He bought a starter boat and took lessons. But when the lesson package was used up, he said kayaking made his back ache. He hadn't mastered the rollover, tended to panic and feel like he was drowning. Next, it was welding, but that lasted 2 weeks. Then he decided to take up disaster preparedness. Ordered a lot of supplies, water filtration devices, dried out astronaut food, solar flashlights, silver blankets that stopped you from getting hypothermia if you were alone in the non-existent forest. She'd been like, Buzz, what are we going to need those for? You think we'll head up to Lake Tahoe in a disaster and then start freezing there? He cut back the limbs on a few trees that were near the house in case of a fire that might come tearing in from the canyon. He didn't have a chainsaw, he said, but he could use his good old sawzall. She watched from the back porch, nursing a margarita, afraid he'd saw off his arm, kept her phone on the table to call 911. But the expensive high-tech power storage unit that went up on the wall, that one did him in. After he failed to hook it up right and had to call in an electrician who openly belittled his efforts, he decided they were sufficiently prepared. The joint problems that stopped him from running had coincided with their empty nest. Liza off at college with their new son-in-law in tow, and then Nick moving out into a studio near the bar where he worked. Buzz had been pushing him to move out for months. He should stand on his own 2 feet, Buzz had said again and again, at the age of 23. But once the decision was finally made, he backpedaled. I've been thinking, he said, why should you take on that extra overhead? Rents are crazy right now, and we've got plenty of room. Gotta go, Dad, said Nick, patted him on the back. The rough beach slouches toward Bethlehem, its hour come round at last. She'd found Buzz on a few occasions standing in Nick's empty bedroom, looking around like he was seeing it for the first time. What are we going to do with all this space? He'd ask when she came in. He started hinting that they should have a family project. Take in some refugees from Afghanistan. You don't mean it, she said. That's a huge commitment. But why not, he asked. We can. If we had a guest house, maybe, she said, but as it is now, our privacy would be gone. Buzz, picture yourself coming downstairs for breakfast. You haven't had your coffee, you're wearing your boxer briefs. Let's say you tied one on the night before, watching a race and downing too many beers. The knees bothering you, or the hip, and there, sitting at the dining room table, is a whole family of Afghans. He shrugged. It wouldn't be so bad. Maybe they're all wearing hoods and have those piercing green eyes, like the girl from the famous magazine cover in the 80s. Oh, we could just take on a single Afghan, a bachelor. I don't even want a bachelor. Just sitting there at the table, expecting a hot breakfast. I don't know if you noticed, but I just got done with serving 2 other people for almost a quarter century, i.e. our children. So I could really use a break. He could make his own meals, couldn't he? Well, we don't have a guest house, so. Unfortunately, he took her objection and ran with it. What if they did have a guest house? He showed her pictures online. You could buy prefab sheds, tiny houses, hip and modern. The colors could match the main house. Hell, for $80,000, they'd even finish it for you. It could have a solar water heater and a kitchenette. Buzz, do we have an extra $80,000 burning a hole in our pocket? I think we could swing it. We have those ETFs. But it's a terrible time to sell. We'll have to pay capital gains, won't we? And the ETFs are for our retirement. He grumbled a bit, so she thought he was letting it go. But a few days later, he brought it up again. They even handle the permits for you, he said. The tiny house companies, they do it all. You hire a local company to pour the slab, and bingo, they bring in the tiny house and set it up on the slab. He measured parts of the backyard and the driveway, marked lines in chalk using a brand new laser level and blue string. See, they could back the truck in right here. Maybe one bush we'd have to lose and a Japanese maple, but we can relocate it. Buzz, listen, she said in bed. I feel like you're rushing into this. 3 months ago, you were all about sea kayaking, and where's the sea kayak now? In the garage, with spider webs on it the size of a house cat. This is different, he said. The refugees can't wait. But $80,000, Buzz, and we're paying Liza's tuition and their rent. It's an investment, Amy. There's a housing shortage in this state. It'll pay for itself if we ever sell this place. if she said yes, maybe he'd forget about it. Maybe the refugees would be like the sea kayak. And I will stop there.
Did the idea of all the ifs and isms, was that something that was in the initial conception of these stories in this book, or did it sort of emerge?
A funny story. The New Yorker. That is a good question. I think in this particular case, it did sort of start out. The whole book was going to be called The Isms, and then Summit, my publisher, W.W. Norton, who may be present or may not, rightly pointed out that it's hard to sell a book when the title isn't a word. So that was a challenge. So it was going to be called The Isms, or The Ists, I guess, after the isms that we're all familiar with. I feel like we all know what an ism is, but an ist isn't quite as, I don't know, it's not quite as known a thing, I guess. So it was, I always like to have like an organizing principle for a story collection. Just makes it a funner game to play, and so that was the one for this. To be honest, a funner game to play, though not involving outright lies like some of my.
The stories have a constellation of characters in common, and each one is from a different character's point of view. So this last story, it mentions a character named Nick, who's in several stories and also has a point of view story. Mm-hmm. That's pretty intricate. How did you organize that? Did you have a chart or something?
Yeah, no. I don't do anything methodical or correct. Mm-hmm. I just... I sort of go through writing a story collection as I blunder through, like, the days in my week and my personal life, and then, there are always just sort of organic connections that crop sort of up, and you perceive them, and it's fun to have characters reappear because you already have, a relationship with them, and so even if it's just a very superficial relationship, you can still enjoy it.
I actually did a diagram of the book. I'll have to show you later, with arrows connecting people and dotted lines and everything. Kidding? So I figured maybe you did the same thing when you wrote it.
That's great.
So when you do that and you have characters in several different stories, how do you make sure that you aren't inconsistent in some way about them? Do you go through at the end and make sure that that they don't have sudden dramatic changes?
Yeah, that's a good question, I guess. I completely rely on consistency readers for that. No, I don't completely, but they are really helpful. I think it's hard to... all sort of characters who are made up, who are just like figments of languages and parts of sentences, none of them come together in some perfect form. They're all just figments that we take as a sort of collective fusion, a sort of presence, right? And so there's not necessarily a tremendous internal logic to really any of them beyond what feels like what is gestural and what sort of feels intuitive, I think. But as a reader as well, I'm not testing the characters I read for their consistency. Mm-hmm. I think much as I don't really test the people I know in real life for their consistency, because what a terrible and I don't know what a hopeless sort of endeavor that would be, because we're also inconsistent, right?
Plus, there's a subjectivity to it, right? Because there are different points of view in each of the stories.
Right. And so you can always have forgivable errors in fiction, right? Just sort of like, oh, that error makes sense because it's all a lie anyway. or whatever.
Another aspect of the book is that it does sort of advance a narrative that's chronological. Like the last story is,
Right.
Last in time, and the first story, I imagine, is
Yes.
first in time.
Right, right. Which is just the way that I sort of write them, in this sort of like simple-minded, plodding, linear way. But it also does help just give a sort of, I think, real feeling progression to things that is a real shape, at least, that you can kind of inherit as a reader from the writer's experience with something, if you know what I mean.
I think I do. Atavists is the title of the book. Maybe people don't know what that means. How do you
I'm
view
sure
that?
they all know what it means. I mean, it means different things, of course, in different lexicographies or whatever. So essentially, it's used in biology and it's used in psychology. In biology, it means in psychology, it sort of was coined to refer to sort of aberrations, criminality that were seen as like primitive or whatever. It's been a little discredited in that usage over time. But then in biology, it refers to evolutionary traits that crop back up again over time. So like a vestigial, I knew this guy named Adam in grad school who had this vestigial gill in his neck, and it would like open up a bit. I'm not kidding, I'm not lying. And it would open up, and lovely guy, very smart. It would sort of like weep little watery bits. And so, or things that other mammals have, certain kinds of cetaceans at a moment in their gestation while they're in the womb, have these kind of legs that were a part of their evolution way back when they were land mammals. But then when the fetus continues to develop, they lose those features. So it's sort of like in criminology, it kind of refers to recidivism. In biology, to ancient kind of primordial pieces of us that crop back up again, sometimes in inconvenient ways. So that was that. I didn't learn that word till I was in my 20s, but I feel confident that others in this room learned it earlier.
Everyone in the room knew.
Everyone knew. I know.
At what point did that become the title, and was that a lens through which you viewed the characters in the stories?
Yeah, it was after my non-word title was rejected by Norm. But I wanted to have an ist be in the title that sort of was a broad umbrella over all the individual ists. And I thought, well, they do sort of, in one interpretation or another, share that hearkening back to sort of past selves or past iterations of the self, or maybe like primal urges. It just covers a lot of ground, and I like that. Mm. Yeah.
This was in what you read, but the characters are living in a Los Angeles suburb or town outside Los Angeles, and they're pretty much privileged people. In a way, that's almost daring to write now. How did you feel about those characters? Is there something about their privilege that...
I hate all those with privilege.
Uh-huh.
No, I'm just
that.
Sorry.
That is the correct answer.
I had just written a novel. The last novel that I wrote before this was called Dinosaurs, and was also about someone privileged economically and living in this basically Scottsdale, Arizona-like place and whatever. And I remember at least one critic who was not pleased with my choice to write this sympathetic account of this rich, heterosexual, cis white male, all these things. Mm-hmm. I could only really say that it was just this, you make a certain shape out of clay, and sometimes that's the shape that it takes. And these characters, I love to write about LA, and that is one of the LAs I know best. It's not the only LA that I've known, but it's the one I've known best for a while now, is that sort of like suburban, like using too much water, walking frilly dogs version of LA. But this is also like really like a liberal enclave. And I think in the Biden interregnum was a particularly fruitful place to write about those kinds of the pitfalls of liberalism, perhaps, that we see sort of boomeranging on us now in the culture.
Yeah, I feel affection for the characters, but I also feel like each of them is ridiculous in some way.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, who among us looks in the mirror and does not feel those two different things? a fondness, at the same time, a contempt. Yeah.
Well, and one other aspect of them being privileged that I think works well is that they're not worried about the next meal or paying the rent. They're worried about climate change. They're worried about the big things that are coming down the pike. So,
I think you can have both. You can have, and you invariably do, because we're just these individuals, these creatures, and in fiction especially, really these. And so you always have the petty, and you always have the small and the personal, and those things are not the same. And then you also have these vast amorphous things kind of floating over it, and these generous impulses that I think we have are also in some, like, even Buzz's impulse, right, is this sort of generosity slightly perverted or distressed, vexed in some way. Yeah. So I like that combination of just the minute and the vast that you can have among those who have the leisure to not just be looking for their next meal.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was fun.
Well, only one left. Thanks, Lydia. Our third and final finalist this evening is Ayşegül Savaş. The stories in Long Distance often feature characters in transit between places at turning points in their lives. You start off thinking a story is about one thing, then the narrative takes a turn and reveals that it's about something else. The clean, straightforward sentences are very skillful, and the dialogue is as much about what isn't said as about what is. Ayşegül.
Thank you. I'm going to read the first pages of a story that's called Cry It Out. For a long time, all we talked about was the baby's sleep. When friends and relatives asked us for updates, we would list the ways in which we were exhausted, in a desperate attempt to make them understand. The baby could only nap if he was in our arms. He cried every few hours and had to be rocked back to sleep. He woke up for the day at 6 a.m, sometimes at 5. Before the birth, my friend Anna had given me a book about baby sleep. It was the only one I needed to read, she assured me. Just take my word for it, she said. This book is the one that works. Anna's son, Luca, was long past the age of constant care, but the advice of the book remained solid, she said. She'd given the book to several other mothers, and they had all been grateful. At the time, I thanked Anna for the gift, though I thought that I wouldn't really need it. I'd always been a little patronizing toward the difficulties of parents. Before the baby, I'd more or less thought that if only mothers were more relaxed, the problems of their children would smoothly unknot. In the weeks following the birth, my husband skimmed the book and summarized this main point. A baby needed to learn how to sleep on its own. The ability to soothe oneself to sleep, the author claimed, was a learned skill, just like eating with a fork or putting on shoes. According to the book, Our baby was still too young to train because the method involved letting the baby cry. In those days, when time expanded to monstrous scales, each day a trial of our endurance, it seemed that we would never get to the mark only a few months away when we would be permitted to carry out the training. We'd heard from other friends that we could start a week or two earlier if the baby showed signs of maturity. They added that it would take some courage on our end. Courage, we joked. Our nerves were so frayed that we would have done anything for a calm evening, a few hours of uninterrupted sleep. A war broke out on the other side of the world on the baby's 4-month birthday. That morning, we had dressed him in a flannel shirt and trousers, though he normally spent all day in pajamas. He didn't read the news of the war until a few days later, and even then we had little idea of the scale of events. We didn't really have time to think about anything but the immediate requirements of our days. My husband had gone back to work, albeit with shortened hours. I greeted him each afternoon with an outpouring of despair. We couldn't continue like this, I said. We needed to make a change. I know, he told me. Soon we'll start the training. Friends came by to bring us food and stay for tea, or go on a walk with the baby strapped to them, hopping him up and down so he would fall asleep. When we asked them on these visits how they were feeling, they would shrug solemnly and say something vague like, "You know," or "It's a strange time." "What happened?" we asked. "Is everything all right?" After a few times, it became clear that they were all referring to the war. It seemed important to state right away that it was on their minds. Some of them, realizing we'd been more or less unaware of the debates, were restless to tell us their version of events. The war defined something about them, something about their worldview, as well as how they were viewed in the world. In other wars, our friends had come together in solidarity. We had organized fundraisers, attended protests, volunteered at organizations. Just the previous year, we had all gathered in the home of Anna for a classical music concert to benefit 2 young artists who had escaped active combat in their hometown. At the end of the evening, Anna's young son Luca had played a pop song on his guitar while his parents collected contributions. The family invited the artists to stay with them for a month while they applied for asylum. We had applauded our friends for their generosity, though it turned out that the young artists had been disruptive, drinking with their friends until the late hours of the night. A shame, we said, when Anna and her husband had been so generous. Our friend Aziz was the only one to point out that a space to congregate with alcohol was the best gift to offer young refugees. Aziz was a peripheral figure in our circle. We never knew whether he would show up and how long he might stay. But his presence was always welcome. He smoked too much and drank with joy. He gave every conversation his full attention. That he'd known hardship far greater than any of us legitimized our gatherings and made them feel that much more worthwhile. In the end, Anna had been forced to ask the artist to leave because Luca's schedule was disturbed by the commotion in their household. He went to bed late on weeknights, woke up tired for school. We agreed that it was an inevitable decision. This war loosened the bonds of our community. Some argued that it was more complicated. The oppressors were not so evil as we had thought unanimously of oppressors of all previous wars. They were our brothers, after all, a people so similar to us in every way. Others said that to forgive sins in our own image was a greater evil than any other. Others still were committed to silence. If they cared one way or another, they were more worried about what their caring might cost them. My husband and I were now fully abreast of the war, its facts, justifications, arguments, and counter-arguments, and we stood startled in its crossfire. Aziz was over one Saturday for a drink. He'd brought a bottle of whiskey, a bag of chips, so different from our other visitors who arrived with chicken stock and casseroles. We hadn't seen Aziz since the birth, though he seemed unaware that our lives had changed dramatically. It was refreshing not to be treated as tired parents. It gave us energy. The baby had been fussy all day, refusing to nap, and we took turns rocking him while Aziz poured drinks. "So, how you guys been?" Aziz asked. We told him about our battles with sleep and about the method of letting the baby cry. "Huh," Aziz said. "Sounds pretty barbaric." Thank you.
teaching or training a baby to sleep is one of the most contentious issues, I think, in our culture. When you thought of the story, did you know where it was going to go from there? Or did you think you were just writing a story about that?
For almost all stories I write, and very different from writing a novel, I sort of know the entire story before I write it. And I've also noticed that in order for me to know a story fully, I need to have two elements to it. And in this case, it's this sleep training a baby and this war that breaks out, and how these two things, and the thing I didn't know when I started writing it, I knew that these two things go together, but I needed to write the story to figure out in what ways they would illuminate each other. And I think this is often the case in my stories, that I'm not really writing to find out what happens because I know it before I begin, but I'm writing to find out how those two elements will be in conversation with each other, and what sort of a moral light they might take.
This is probably a question you get a lot, but you are Turkish and you write in English. How did that choice come about?
In many ways, I wouldn't necessarily say that it was a choice. It just came about. One reason, so my mother tongue is Turkish, but very importantly, I started reading. When I became a reader, I was simultaneously, my parents, we had just moved to London, and I simultaneously started reading in English and in Turkish. So my imagination formed in English as well. This is one reason. And I think a more important reason is that my husband is not Turkish, and he doesn't speak Turkish, and he's my first reader. So I think the very practical reason is that I need him to read my manuscripts and tell me what to do about them.
Have you ever thought about writing something in Turkish as opposed to English, or is that just your writer's mind is English?
I think it is my writer's mind exists in English. I mean, I've written a few things privately like that I'll never show anyone, but I've never quite thought about a serious project.
How did this collection come about? Was it a matter of having enough stories to collect, or it's thematic also, and the title suggests that theme. So how did all of that happen?
It was about having enough stories, although I had a lot of stories before this, and they weren't coming together into anything. I think it was also a matter of discovering what my own subject matter is in writing, or beginning to discover what my subject matter is, and that happened really alongside my journey as a novelist. And once I knew what that subject matter was, then I could sort of leave behind my earlier stories and start focusing on these. I wouldn't say that I necessarily say, like, these are the themes and let me write a story in the theme, but I somehow had figured out how to really fish out my own interests and how to say, oh, this is a topic that interests me. And I think, when I was just starting out, I thought anything interested me, which, superficially, like most things do interest me. Okay. But you have to sort of know what your real interests are as a writer, and that's a very long process.
Some of the stories are very specific about where they take place, Rome, Paris, Marseille, and some of them are sort of an unnamed city. What determines that choice for you, whether to be specific or not?
I think often when the city is specific, then there is an element of tourism, and it serves the opposite effect of naming the city. It's, if I find that if I name a place, then it almost certainly will be foreign or not known very well to the characters. And if I don't name a place, I think Instinctively, I want the unnamed place to become more intimate or more interior, and not naming it allows that, because if you were to name, a foreign city, then the reader might say, oh, well, this story is not about me, or it's, it concerns like the type of people who live in Marseille, as opposed to this could be universal, and this is, a psychological landscape.
So in this story, you're not, the one that you just read, you're not specific about where it takes place. Mm-hmm. And it's for that reason?
Yes, for that reason, that both, the city where this couple live and this war that's happening in the background, I wanted, first of all, without getting into any sort of debates about, well, who is it and what's going on, just the ways in which people deal with atrocity, and our reactions to protecting ourselves from hardship and from hard choices. And I thought that, stripped of geography, I could write the story better.
How do you think about the order of the stories in the book?
I had no idea how to order. Actually, my editor, Callie, she ordered most of the book, and when she was doing it, I began to see, oh yes, like, of course, the last story in the collection is called Twirl, and I said, but isn't that sort of like a fun story we should put like in the beginning? And she said, no, like we want to have the collection like open up like a twirl, and that's sort of the way that one would arrange an album, I suppose, and paying attention to those beats. And then I think we were also considering, let's not have two Paris stories back to back, things, that sort of arrangement, to like aesthetic arrangement.
So to just give a little variety to the reading experience. To
give some variety to, I guess the mood becomes darker as the collection progresses, and then ends on this like more frivolous twirling.
Did you write anything specifically for this collection with that in mind?
We had the whole collection, and we're editing it. And gosh, and I said, I have one more story, can you please wait? And I need to write it. And it was the story called Marseille, about a young mother who goes on holiday for the first time with her two childless friends. And I just thought, this idea of tourism and visiting a new place, but also the idea of seeing past selves, that she was like these women once. It's a story about aging. It's a story about being a parent, and I thought that would fit in quite nicely. And they said, sure, we can wait. And I wrote it as fast as I could.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ayşegül. Before we announce the winner of the Story Prize, let's hear it for all three writers. Any one of them would be a deserving choice. Thank you for sharing your work and your insights about writing. And now, Jay Lindsay, president of the Chisholm Foundation, will announce the 22nd winner of the Story Prize.
Well, thank you all very much for joining us this evening for the special presentation and our exceptional authors. It's clear that short fiction is in very, very capable hands and shows an amazing variety. The Chisholm Foundation is very proud to have sponsored these awards for the last 20 plus years, and it's my privilege in that capacity to announce the winner of the 22nd Story Prize. But before I do that, there is one person that hasn't been thanked this evening, and that's Larry Dark. Larry, thank you so much for all you do for this award and for your great and insightful interviews. So, from amongst the 114 entrants into this year's competition and the 3 outstanding finalists, the judges have decided to award this 22nd Annual Story Prize to André Alexis.
Prepare a speech. I'm really grateful, and the most important thing for me right now is to mention Jenna, who is my editor, and of course Ellen, my agent. I loved working with Jenna in a way that I wish I could express exactly. Someone who is as attentive to my work as I am, and who was really about making every story as good as it could be, as opposed to flattering me or having anything to do with me. It was about the work. I want to thank also McClellan and Stewart in Canada and my partner Elaine and the Story Prize. This is a great honor. Thank you very much.
Everyone is welcome to join us for beverages and good cheer. Thank you.